All right, guys, we're out here on this beautiful day here in Southwest Ohio. This is the birthplace of Tecumseh, or at least supposedly, somewhere around here. We don't really know for sure, as he was a Shawnee Native American and they were moving around a lot. But this is the Old Town Reserve Park just outside of Xenia, Ohio in Greene County. Xenia is very close to where the Shawnee capital was at the time of Tecumseh's birth in the 1700s. Now this is a Ohio historical marker of Tecumseh, kind of giving him, telling a little biography of him. So we're going to go ahead and read this right now to give you guys an understanding of who Tecumseh was, and then we'll get more into his family tree here in a minute. So, Tecumseh, the birthplace, supposedly, or somewhere around here. So Tecumseh was born at this site in the year 1768, at the very instant that a great meteor seared across the sky. So supposedly what happened was, I don't know if this was made up or whatever for tradition, but by the time Tecumseh was born, his mother saw a shooting star in the sky, and so they named their child Tecumseh, which in the Shawnee language means shooting star. So that's how he got his name, Tecumseh. The birth occurred while his parent, Shawnee war chief Puckeshinwau, and his wife Methotasa were en route from their village of Kispoko Town on the Scioto River to a major tribal council at the Shawnee tribal capital village of Chillicothe, which is now Old Town Chillicothe, which is located in Xenia. Modern day Chillicothe is located in Ross County. That is not the same place. I originally thought it was, but it's not. There was an old Chillicothe where the Shawnee lived. The Shawnee did not live in the current Chillicothe, which is located 2 arrow flights northwest of this site. 2 arrow flights, like shooting an arrow. Though prohibited by tribal tradition from becoming chief of the Shawnee, Tecumseh rose to become one of the greatest warriors, orators, and military strategists of any tribe in America. So what happens is, there are different bands of the Shawnee tribe. The Shawnee and most Native American tribes in the United States were not civilized countries. They weren't like their own nation, basically. There were different bands of each tribe. Shawnee and Puckeshinwau, who was his father, who was a war chief, he was born into the Kispoko clan. They lived in a town called Kispoko. The main branch of the Shawnee, the most powerful, were the Chillicothes, and there were some others around the area. At the time, the Shawnee tribe consisted of many areas, mostly in the Ohio Valley. There were some in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and some even up in Pennsylvania originally. But that's where most of them were from in this area. There were different bands of them. Tecumseh was born into the Kispoko clan, though. Kispoko band, of them. What happens is, during a conflict known as Lord Dunmore's War in 1774, his father, Puckeshinwau, was fighting with Chief Cornstalk out in West Virginia to try to, the British royal governor at the time was John Murray, the Lord Dunmore, was trying to take back the Ohio Valley that they had previously lost in Pontiac's rebellion about 10 years prior. Puckeshinwau was out there with Cornstalk, and Puckeshinwau ended up dying at that battle in October of 1774 after the British set a fort up there. So what happens here? This is to oppose the grave threat of rapidly encroaching white settlement. Native American lands, Tecumseh successfully molded and became the leader of leader of a confederation of tribes, numbering some 50,000 warriors. So like I said, he created an entire confederation. Tecumseh's vision was to create his own country led by entirely Native Americans up somewhere in the northern part of Ohio, up on the Great Lakes. But that never happened because the Americans didn't let it happen, unfortunately. This opposition might well have succeeded had it not been for his jealous brother, Tenskwatawa. Now, that's a pretty bold statement here, blaming Tenskwatawa on his failure. I don't know if I really agree with that, but whatever. The prophet, whose rash acts precipitated the Battle of Tippecanoe and undermined all Tecumseh's efforts, forced by circumstance to ally himself and his remaining followers with the British in the War of 1812. Tecumseh was killed at the Battle of Thames, near present Chatham, Ontario, Canada, on the 5th of October, 1813. So, Tecumseh fought for about 5 years to try to create that independent nation of Native Americans, but a bunch of guys specifically William Henry Harrison, the governor at the time of the Indiana Territory, didn't let it happen. And they didn't stand much of a chance, unfortunately. But they tried to ally with the British and kind of help the British hold on to Canada, because there was an effort by the United States during the War of 1812, which a lot of people don't know, was the U.S. was going to annex the entire country of Canada, but that's where the battle took place, up here. So the British and Tecumseh teamed up to fight against the Americans. So in that war, at least in the western frontier, the United States was fighting against the Native Americans and the British in that war. So that's what happened. But Tecumseh fought his entire life to try to save his culture, and unfortunately, the white man brought him out. And then the Indian Removal Act was signed in 1830 by President Andrew Jackson, which moved the rest of them out onto Indian reserves. And fun fact, Tenskwatawa, his brother, the Prophet, ended up dying on a reserve in Kansas in 1836. So, very tragic what happened. That entire generation of Shawnee was fighting for their own culture that had existed hundreds of years before the white man came in. All right, guys, this is the Great Council State Park. I was going over here. This is the site of the old Chillicothe, which is where the Shawnee, basically the capital was at the time of Tecumseh's birth in 1768. It's about half a mile from where we first were. It said 2 arrow shots away, which means the Shawnee could shoot arrows quarter mile. So I just thought that was kind of funny to bring it up. This place just opened in June of last year, 2024, so it's brand new. This facility I didn't even know existed. It's about a couple miles, like 3 or 4 miles outside of Xenia on US 68. This is Tecumseh, brand new statue. Pretty good work of art. So right here, guys, this area is where the old Chillicothe town was, and this is where Tecumseh was taken shortly after his birth. Now, I previously mentioned this is his famous Shawnee village. It was destroyed 4 times by pioneer forces and remained Ohio's leading Indian town until about 1807. The rise of the West stood at the bank of Count's House. Now, 1807 is when they built Prophetstown in Indiana, and most of the political and civil things that took place within the Shawnee happened in Indiana after that, because by this point, 1807, Ohio had already become a state, and a lot of settlers were coming in. Alright, guys, so this is the electronic version of the tree. As you can see, I inspired this off of Useful Charts. If you've ever seen Useful Charts YouTube channel, this is very similar to how they do their family trees. But I just thought this was really interesting, and it looks really nice, and I have everything organized as is. I don't have my face cam on here because you won't be able to see parts of the tree if I have my face cam on, so that's why I don't have it on. But we're going to take a look here. So, this is Tecumseh right here. He was born in 1768 and died in 1813, as you can see right here. His parents were Puckeshinwau and Methotask. Puckeshinwau obviously died when Tecumseh was very young in 1774. Tecumseh was 6 years old at the time of his father's death. Puckeshinwau died at the Battle of Point Pleasant during Lord Dunmore's War in West Virginia, which at the time was part of the Virginia colony. Lord Dunmore, the colonial governor at the time, was appointed by George III, so this was still pre-United States, went in to try to expand his lands to the Ohio River, which he successfully did at that battle, in that war. So, Puckeshinwau ended up dying. Tecumseh ended up being raised by his eldest brother, Cheeseekau. Cheeseekau was born in 1760, about 8 years before Tecumseh was born. Tecumseh had a couple other siblings as well, but I didn't put them all on here just because there would just be too many, and I want to make this as brief as possible. This is Tecumseh. Tecumseh, along with Cheeseekau, both helped really raise Tecumseh, because Puckeshinwau died. Most of Tecumseh's formative years took place under the care of his older siblings. Tecumseh was born in 1761, so she was about 7 years older than him, and Cheeseekau was 8 years older than him. Also, he had a younger brother, Tenskwatawa, who is known as the Shawnee Prophet. Puckeshinwau had actually died before Tenskwatawa's birth, but he was the father. Tenskwatawa was born in January of 1775. Pukesinwa died in October of 1774. It is unclear when their mother died, however. She was born sometime around 1737. We don't know exactly. Now, I mentioned that Tecumseh was raised by his siblings, Chisikau and Tecumseh. Well, shortly after his father's death, he was adopted sometime between 1775 and 1778, we don't know for sure, by the Chalagatha chief, Blackfish. Now, I would like to make it clear that the Shawnee, as I said this in the clip before this, the Shawnee were not a unified tribe in what you might think of as a tribe, as kind of like a unified country. Well, they were unified, kind of. It's weird. There were multiple bands of them. Tecumseh was from the Kispoko clan. Chief Blackfish was from the Chalagatha band of the Shawnee. There was also the Pikawa and some other ones as well. But Tecumseh was adopted into this clan by Blackfish, as Blackfish saw Tecumseh's skills and basically wanted him to succeed him as his heir once Blackfish died, in a way, and was going to train him out to be a great warrior to defend from the white man. This is the site of Old Chillicothe where Tecumseh ended up living after being adopted by Blackfish. It's located in Xenia, Ohio today, which we just saw in the video. I'm going to make a video later on showing more about this, but this is located in Greene County, Ohio, 2 arrow shots away from where Tecumseh was born. His parents were actually on the way to a council meeting in Old Chillicothe during that time. Old Chillicothe was ravaged and sacked about 4 different times over its history that it existed, and it only existed for a handful of decades. So, Blackfish, what's interesting as well, Blackfish also adopted Daniel Boone, as you can see over here. So, kind of, Tecumseh and Daniel Boone were siblings, in a way, although Tecumseh was young at this time. Basically, here's what happens. This is an interesting thing. Blackfish ends up adopting Daniel Boone as well as 27 other of his settlers. Blackfish goes down in 1778 to try and stop the Americans from settling in the area west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, previously, King George III of Great Britain had issued the Proclamation Act of 1763 following what was known as Pontiac's Rebellion, where the British were basically destroyed by Native American forces to basically ease further conflict between the Native Americans and the British. George III in 1763 passed the Proclamation Act, which made it illegal for British colonists to settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, during this time, Daniel Boone sets up a fort in what is now Kentucky. At Boonesboro is what he called it, named after himself, obviously, in 1775. Now, the British government didn't really care, nor did they really know a whole lot about this, because they were too worried about dealing with their own rebels in Massachusetts at this time in 1775. The war for independence for the United States began in 1775 up in New England. The last thing the British Crown wanted to worry about was their colonists settling west of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, Daniel Boone, just like some of his other counterparts of pioneers like Simon Kenton, among others, did not care about the act at all, and they saw themselves, okay, basically we've declared independence shortly after this. Who cares about British rule at this point? So they just went ahead and settled west. That is a big deal for independence that a lot of people don't talk about. We just talk about taxation. Well, there was more to the story than just no taxation without representation. But I digress. That's what happened. 3 years later, Blackfish leads a army of Shawnee. Hears about Daniel Boone's settlement, tries to put it down. He successfully captures Daniel Boone and 27 of his men and brings them up to Chalagatha. Blackfish then adopts Daniel Boone into his tribe, basically, to try and purify him. Well, Daniel Boone ends up escaping after about a month and heads back down to Boonesboro. Now, the following year, Blackfish has to fight off the white settlers as they're trying to come up and ravage Chalagatha again in 1779. Chief Blackfish was mortally wounded at that battle and eventually led to his death, where he died in 1779. What had led the Shawnee throughout the last decade or two in Chalagatha, and was now left without their chief there as the white men came in and the Americans came in and basically killed him. Well, they did kill him, unfortunately. Meanwhile, down here, time goes by. The Northwest Indian War takes place, where Tecumseh refuses to sign the document ceding lands over to the Northwest Territory. That is in 1795. That happens in Greenville, the Treaty of Greenville, things like that. Cheesy Cal dies in 1792 fighting down with the Creeks and Seminole in Tennessee. His remains were never taken back up, and we really don't know where they are, but he died down there. Tecumseh becomes chief of the Shawnee in 1796, officially, of that band, which is basically the most powerful in the entire tribe at that point. Around 1805, 1807, something around then, in the early 1800s, his brother Tenskwatawa starts to become very popular within the Shawnee culture. He becomes very spiritual. He starts meditating, things like that, and he gets a vision to unite all Native American tribes in the Northwest Territory to defend from white settlers, and that's what he's going to do. He also gained credibility because he accurately predicted a solar eclipse in the early 1800s around this time, which gave him a lot of credibility, like I said, which most Native Americans and people at that time didn't really understand how all that worked, and so it was a pretty big deal and very spiritual. So Tenskwatawa is there. However, Tenskwatawa prompts his brother Tecumseh to form this alliance, and Tecumseh tries to create his own Indian Confederacy, Native American Confederacy, which doesn't last. And he ends up siding with the British during the War of 1812 as well, because the British had always been on the Native American side, but they both lose. And Tecumseh ends up dying in the Battle of Thames in Canada in 1813. But right after this happens, backtracking a little bit, the prophet creates the town in Prophetstown, Indiana, because at this point all the Shawnee had been pushed out of Ohio, so now they have to go into Indiana, and so Prophetstown is moved. The capital is moved from Old Chillicothe to Prophetstown in 1808, where the Battle of Tippecanoe will be fought in 1811. Tecumseh was not at that battle. William Henry Harrison's troops go in, who is the governor of the Indiana Territory at the time. Tenskwatawa attempts to fight him off, and the Native Americans get badly defeated at the Battle of Tippecanoe, and William Henry Harrison becomes a nationwide hero for that for some reason. But other than that, the Shawnee try to lead some more expeditions to defeat white settlers, but all of them fail. The last big push and leader was Black Hoof, who ended up dying in the early 1830s, 1831, right after Andrew Jackson had signed the Indian Removal Act, removing all Native Americans from the United States. Tenskwatawa ends up getting relocated to reserves and ends up dying in Kansas in 1836. So, very sad what happened to them. So that's what happens with this. Now let's go down the family tree, what I thought was interesting. Tecumseh actually has descendants still alive today. Now, I'm not going to go all the way down to today just for privacy purposes, because these guys are private citizens living in the real world, so we don't want you tracking them down or finding any information about them. We're just going to be showing you the next 2 generations down, which I thought was pretty interesting. So we have Tecumseh, who was born in 1796 and died in 1843. Tecumseh also died in a reserve. Now, I have Tecumseh in red because they were actually a full-blown Shawnee. Tecumseh had not really had a long marriage that was significant. He married one woman. I can't really recall her name. It started with an M or something like that. But he had one wife, and that was the child with her. But that marriage did not last, and Tecumseh ended up having a couple illegitimate children as well, including Squatto Rainey and Jenny Cross, who was actually his daughter. Jenny lived in Adams County, Ohio, and we will now in a minute show you that area of Tecumseh's ancestors. So Jenny Cross died in 1860. She married a guy named Shadrach Penn, and they had about 5 or 6 kids in total. I have 5 listed here. Some of them are buried in various places around the countryside in southwest Ohio. This is the Jaybird Cemetery, where some of them are buried. This is in Adams County, Ohio. This is one among many places. This is just the place that I happen to go to in the video. Many places that these guys are buried in. So these are some of Tecumseh's grandchildren. Here's a photograph or a portrait rather, of Cyrus and Mosiah Penn, as well as Dr. Jerome Penn. One of his grandsons was a doctor. I'm not sure what profession exactly, but interesting there. So yeah, they're buried in various places, and these people all have children today, and grandchildren, great-grandchildren that are all probably still living, or great-great-grandchildren, or what have you. Probably actually later than that, probably like 4th great-grandchildren. But anyway, that is really interesting. And so there's probably a lot of people today that don't even know that they are descended from Tecumseh, because this line is really unknown. But with DNA tests and record keeping and things like that, we have confirmed that Tecumseh has some descendants still alive who were not put on reserves, as they did not consider themselves to be full-blown Shawnees. So the Shawnee tribe still exists today in Oklahoma and Kansas and places like that, and they have a tribal chief still to this day and everything like that. But Tecumseh was really the last push, and one of the last hopes that the Northwest Native Americans had to keep their culture. And I do think that that we do need to learn from this time period, because it is very tragic, one of the darkest hours in American history, in my opinion, the removal of the Native Americans. And basically these entire generations of Native Americans and the Shawnee fought to preserve their culture that had existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years before the Europeans came along. So that's just what I thought. I thought I'd show you a little bit of history that way with the family tree. Now this is just fairly scraping the surface, if you would, on this. But let me know what you guys think down below. I'm going to do another video on the Shawnee, basically the entire genealogy of the entire tribe in the next couple months. So let me know what you guys think about that. I'll see you guys next time. We're out here in Adams County, Ohio, about an hour drive away from where we were before. Now, discussing Tecumseh's descendants, we don't know a whole lot, but we do know that Tecumseh did have kids with unknown women at some point in his life, and those kids had children, married Americans. So one of his granddaughters married into the Newman family. His daughter married into the Penn family, who then married into the Newman family, and there's some of them buried here. So I believe one of these gravestones are actually buried here. So there are potentially a lot of people in Adams County, Ohio today, or in this part of the state, that are descended from Tecumseh. So Tecumseh does have living descendants today, and in the family tree we just showed you, there are quite a few that exist and probably do still to this day. But we're out here in the middle of nowhere, out here in Adams County. There's another cemetery as well, which we're going to go to here in a second. All right, guys, we're here at the Jaybird Cemetery as well. It's another cemetery where some of Tecumseh's family's buried. This right here, the Penn family. C.A. Penn, born in 1832, 1892. This is one of Tecumseh's grandchildren. So, pretty cool. The grave's all crusted up. It's beautiful out here, this cemetery. He actually served in the Civil War, as you can see right here. Born in 1832, died in 1892. So very cool. There's a number of other Penns buried in this cemetery as well. So that's really cool. They still bury people here as well. But yeah, this is out. There's still Tecumseh descendants alive today, like I said, and they lived a normal life. So just so you guys think, if you're, a normal, what you consider to be a regular person, and you don't think you're descended from Native Americans, well, there are still some people out there that are related to Native Americans, even though they're not Native American. So these are just normal, regular, everyday people that happen to be grandkids of Tecumseh. Did this guy know it? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But he was, according to the records that have been, that I've found and stuff. So thank you guys for watching. Be sure to comment, like, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Wah.